Truss girders and bridges add a dramatic touch to any model railroading scene. In this video, I'll show you how to quickly create these structures out of basswood strips. The techniques we use make it easy to make exact duplicates so that the left and right sides of a truss structure align perfectly. We'll start with a scrap of sheetrock, ceiling tile, or a bulletin board as a base. Next, we'll place our sketch for our truss on that piece of board. We'll then cover it with a piece of waxed paper. This is very important. We're going to use push points. That's the reason for the board underneath. Push a point at the far end through the paper and wax paper, and one on the far end on the other side. Stretch out that plastic as you do it. You'll notice that our vertical lines are 1.25 inches apart. That's going to be the spacing for the vertical members of the truss. We'll now take a piece of 1/8 square basswood, and we'll use that for the top truss member. I'm going to place that with the line of my sketch just in front of it as we're looking at this picture. We'll place push points on either side. Use quite a few of them. Just avoid where the vertical lines come up and touch the basswood. Now we'll place a pin 2.5 inches down below the top member on either end, and we'll put a push point at the center just as a marker. Take a small piece of basswood and push up on a 1/32 by 1/8 piece of basswood to form the arch. We'll push it up about 1 inch. We'll use push pins to position that. And again, we're going to use quite a few of them to lock this in place. We'll now use a small miter box, and we're going to proceed to measure and cut each of the vertical members. We'll start with the center one first, and that's going to get a square cut on the end. You want to cut these so that they just fit in without disturbing the horizontal and arc member at all. If you're a little oversized, you can sand it off with an emery board. We'll now proceed to work down both sides of the truss out towards the ends, measuring and cutting each piece. For these, you're going to cut them at a slight angle because they're following the curve of the truss. And right now, as we cut them, we're just dry fitting them into the truss. We're not gluing them yet. Next, we are going to glue each vertical member in place. We'll align the wood strips with the lines on the drawing. If you start aligning with the first line to the left of that vertical one, you'll do the same thing for every single one. This will maintain that 1.25 inch spacing throughout the truss. Take your time, and as you place each vertical member, just double check as you press the ends that you haven't cocked it against that line. You want it to be as perfect as possible because you will see variations. It's amazing. You can see when things are not perfectly parallel when you look at a truss. Now we'll cut 9 short pieces of 1/8 by 1/8 basswood. Cut them about 1/4 inch long, maybe a little bit less. And we're going to glue one at each spot on the curved lower truss member, just opposite where the vertical comes down and touches it. These spacers should look like this. We'll now place glue on the face of each spacer. We'll take a piece of 1/32 by 1/8 basswood, the same as the first one we used for the first curve, and we'll glue that up against those blocks. Use a series of small clothespin clamps to hold these guys in place. While that glue is setting up, we'll cut a couple of strips out of an index card. You're going to cut these strips about 3/8 of an inch wide. We'll then cut squares out of this strip that are about 3/8 by 3/8, and then nip the corners on one edge at a 45-degree angle. Should look like the diagram to the right there. Now remove the truss from the wax paper and trim off the curved truss members that are extending out. Leave about an inch past the last vertical truss member. You don't know how that's going to fit up when you put it into your layout, so you want to have a little bit extra wood there. Next, we'll glue a gusset plate at each junction. We'll use a tweezer to hold the plate and use a small brush to apply glue evenly to the surface. Take your time with this. You want to make sure you line up that gusset. The broad edge should be just at the edge of the curved or horizontal member. And where you've nipped the two 45-degree corners, that should land right on the vertical. Now we're going to put that plastic paper back down. And this time we place the truss with the gusset plates facing the wax paper. We are now going to use 1/32 by 1/8 basswood and cut our diagonal braces. Use a generous amount of glue on each end. We'll start with the end ones first. And the reason for this is if you make a mistake and you cut it a little too short, the next one you make has to be a little shorter anyway. You haven't wasted any wood. Alternate. If you start with them facing in, the next one will face out. And work your way from both ends towards the center. And you'll see that the diagonals are alternating. Check each joint and add additional glue with a brush if necessary up at the corners. You actually have a little pocket there where the diagonal fits behind the gusset plate in the intersection of the truss members. Your finished truss should look like this.